Alright, looks like everyone's here. We'll go ahead and get started. How's everybody doing today?
Very
good. Beautiful Saturday, isn't it? Yeah. Alright, so first of all, I'd just like to say thanks for coming. We really appreciate you spending part of your afternoon with us. My name is Bob Harris, and I'm one of the founding members of Game Plan Preppers. And I brought along some of my friends today, some of our other founding members. We've got Shawn Tipping, who you'll hear from a little bit later. We've got Sarah Tipping, his wife, over here in the corner, and in the back corner we have Ben White. He's one of our founding members as well. He's going to video record this for posterity, I guess. So just wanted to introduce you to the group. I also would like to say thanks to a couple of our, our host and hostess, Gary Gephardt and Vanessa, both in the very back, and they've been nice enough to invite a few of you here to join us today, so thank you for that. So what I'm going to do is go ahead and dive right in. I know we all have busy schedules, and I want to have out of respect for your time, we'll go ahead and get started. Game Plan Preppers was opened up and designed for a number of reasons, and created for a number of reasons. You can see some of those on the board here, but just to boil it all down and think through, or really from my standpoint, the main reason why Game Plan Preppers exists is to bring emergency and disaster preparedness to what we consider mainstream America, everyday people like you and everyday people like us and our families. So that's really our goal, is to help people understand the types of emergencies and disasters, dangers and hazards that are out there, and really educate you and put you in a position so that you're better prepared to maintain the safety and the security of your family and your friends and your loved ones. And that's what Game Plan Preppers is all about. So today what we're going to do is just spend a little bit of time learning about emergency and disaster preparedness, and hopefully we'll have a little fun while we're at it. Is that good? All right, so we're going to make this interactive. We're going to make this a little bit interactive, and so what I want to do is just start by thinking through certain aspects of survival in general, okay? And so what I've put here on the screen is a bit of a matching game, and I want us to think through, because if you really think about it, there's a very limited number of things, but there are certainly a few things that all of us require to live. So you've got to have air to breathe, you've got to have water to drink, you've got to have food to eat, and of course shelter to protect you from the elements. Now I was showing this presentation to my wife, and she swears there should be a fifth element, chocolate, at the bottom of this list. But I told her I hadn't seen any research that would actually support that. She's right. She's right? Okay, yeah. I thought I might get a couple people who agree with me on that. But since we haven't seen any research, what's that?
And coffee.
And coffee is another one, I'm sure.
Withdrawals go in the first 24 hours.
Coffee should be at the top of the list. All right, well, we'll adjust the slides for next time, and we'll make sure those two are on there. But we'll stick with those four for now. And so really all I wanted to do in order to get us thinking about it is walk through each of these elements according to what we call the rule of threes. And so what we've got is survival needs on the left, and a corresponding time amount on the right. And what I want you to do is tell me which one belongs to which. So we're going to start with air. So can someone tell me how long the average person can survive without air? 3 minutes. That one's pretty easy, right? And that's for the average person. Everybody's a little bit different. I personally can only hold my breath for about a minute before I pass out. But you do know that you can last a little bit longer than that without air, but you start incurring brain damage, etc., before you actually pass away. One thing I will throw out there, just little tidbits of information from time to time. Does anyone know how much or how long the world record is for being able to go without air or hold your breath? Any thoughts? Close, close. It's actually about 15 minutes and 2 seconds. Wow. So that's the world record. So there's someone out there who can actually hold their breath for that long. It's kind of interesting. So let's go ahead and do the next one. How about water? How long can we go without water?
3 days.
3 days. Excellent. Excellent job. All right. So we can do water for about 3 days, and that is definitely a critical element. Given that our bodies are comprised of roughly 2/3 water, it doesn't take long for your body to realize it's not getting what it needs to survive. And so water, we can only last for about 3 days. Now how about the next one, food? Any thoughts there? Kind of narrowing it down. 3 weeks, exactly right. So that one's quite a bit longer, isn't it? Food, you can last 3 weeks. Now the other option was 3 hours. I know there's times when I'm at work about 9 o'clock in the morning and lunchtime is at noon. It feels like 3 hours and I might not make it. But the reality is you can go 3 weeks. The body actually will start having issues and letting you know that it's being deprived of food a lot sooner than that, won't it? So you can go several hours and your body will start realizing that it needs additional sustenance. So you can go as long as 3 weeks, but along the way your body starts shutting down. So you start experiencing things like dizziness and nausea, headaches, hunger pains, those kinds of things, weakness. But along the way that continues to progress until eventually your body decides it just can't make it anymore. So by process of elimination, we're up to shelter, and that one is 3 hours, right? Now that one might surprise you a little bit, as it did me, but the reality is what we're talking about here is shelter and being protected from the elements under very harsh weather conditions. So extreme heat and extreme cold. The reality is, as we sit here on a gorgeous Saturday, I was thinking if I'm sitting like on a beach under a palm tree with my favorite beverage, I could probably last longer than 3 hours. But the reality is if you're out in a blizzard or snowstorm or in the middle of the desert in extreme heat or cold, then your body will actually lose its ability to maintain your core body temperature. So your body starts going a little haywire until eventually it will kind of self-destruct on itself and you'll die from those extreme temperatures. So again, has anybody heard of the rule of threes before? I'm just curious. All right, so a couple of you have. So that's just something we use to think about the critical elements that we need to survive. As we're thinking about emergency and disaster preparedness, it's helpful to be thinking about it in terms of maintaining those things and being able to supply those things to yourself and to your family in the event of an emergency or disaster. Now, speaking a little bit about emergencies and disasters, does anybody remember what happened in Greensburg, Kansas in 2007? Yeah, it's tragic, wasn't it? How about Joplin, Missouri in 2011? A little closer. And then Moore, Oklahoma just a couple of years ago, right? So what was the underlying event that happened in all three of those places? Tornado. Yes, a deadly destructive tornado in all of those cases. And given the fact that we live in Tornado Alley, it's not surprising that this sort of thing happens from time to time. It's something that we just have to deal with in living in this area. Just to give you a couple of interesting facts about the Joplin, Missouri tornado, because it was actually considered the most costly tornado in U.S. history. It caused over 2.2 to 2.8 billion in damage. It's also known as one of the deadliest tornadoes in U.S. history. In fact, it was the deadliest one since 1947. And about 850 people died as a result of that tornado, and over 1,100 more were injured because of that tornado. All right, so that's some of the destruction that can take place. One of the facts I remember about Greensburg, Kansas, is that once that tornado rolled through, it had destroyed 95% of that town. And 10 years after that tornado, well, close to 10 years after that tornado, the population of Greensburg is only about half of what it was at the time the tornado occurred. So just some things to consider about tornadoes and experiencing that. And so what I realized is we haven't taken time, maybe you've had some time, I think some of you know each other, but what I'd like to do is I want to make sure that this is interactive. So I want you to take just a second, especially if there's someone at the table you haven't met, and take about 30 seconds, introduce yourself to that person, tell them your name, and think about and share with them a memory or an experience that you've had involving tornadoes. It doesn't have to be negative, it could just be, hey, I love that movie, The Wizard of Oz. But share something with your neighbor for about 30 seconds, then allow them to do the same if you would.
Teresa. Nice to meet you. Oh, come on in.
I'm Gary.
Hi, Gary Ware.
There you go.
But I can't remember.
You can tell.
You're back there in the background.
That's right.
Yeah.
You want to color tornadoes, John?
I'll do both of them.
Yeah, Jeff, you guys are around.
First time since I lived here, I was actually in the basement. Like 11 o'clock in the morning.
Tornado for me is fortunate. I've
The
never
tornado
been.
was heading north.
I
So, thank God my little basement, 'cause I've never.
Quite a bit of discussion, as I mentioned earlier, due to the nature that we do live in Tornado Alley, I'm sure that a lot of you have had experience of some sort, either directly or indirectly with tornadoes. So thank you for sharing that with each other, and hopefully that gave you a chance to get to know some people at your table. Did anyone hear anything or share anything that you wouldn't mind sharing with the group? Has anyone been through anything that they'd be willing to share? No? All right, well, I'm not going to force you to share. I was just, oh, you had one?
Now, since you mentioned Joplin, well, actually, my mom and I have some friends of my mom's. Well, I know them well. But their last names are the Woodells.
Okay.
You know, and but actually, they used to live there once in Joplin. While in Joplin, Missouri before, people this whole thing hit down there before. I think my mom and I were thinking about them lately, and I believe they didn't get the warning.
Oh, wow.
Warning though, they were so funny and weird.
Yeah.
Weird though, I go about why they did the warnings.
Wow, yeah. Those are extremely important, critically important. Along the lines of Joplin, as you were saying that, I was remembering shortly thereafter, I traveled for a living, and I was just driving up the interstate right next to it, and I just happened to look over to the side, and I just saw, I mean, everything was just flattened. And it took me by surprise because I didn't realize, I just wasn't putting two and two together, and it almost took my breath away to just see the devastation and destruction that occurred. So thank you for sharing that. In fact, for certain people who are sharing, we are providing paracord bracelets. You'll learn a little bit more about paracord when Shawn talks to you about our emergency kits, but we thought we'd just hand those out as a nice souvenir of spending time with us and interacting. So let's go ahead and go to the next slide, and we've talked a little bit about tornadoes, and tornadoes I think are certainly an extreme or important example of the types of destruction and emergencies and disasters that we need to prepare for. But I thought this slide did a really good job at kind of creating a little chaos on the slide, but also spelling out a number of other emergencies and bringing to our minds the types of disasters that we just have to live with on a day-to-day basis. Being humans living, in the United States, these are a lot of the things that we have to deal with. We could probably come up with several more of those if we wanted to, but what I thought I would do next is just share with you some news headlines, if that's okay. We've pulled these news headlines out of newspapers in the United States, and I just want to read some of them to you as we go through this slide deck. So, global stock markets fall amid oil rout. Blizzard Jonas storm surge could cause record flooding. Wintertime floods among costliest ever. DC hasn't seen a blizzard like this in nearly 100 years.
So this is more or less current.
I'm going to get to that. You're exactly right. So let's go through this, and I'll ask the question. So Alex becomes first Atlantic hurricane born in January since 1938. How a water crisis in Flint, Michigan became federal state of emergency. Definitely recent news, right? Mississippi River flooding to threaten more levees, homes after leaving St. Louis area submerged. Alaska hit by powerful 7.1 earthquake. And 30 dead, hundreds of thousands without power in the Northeast. So to your point, and the question I was going to ask, I mentioned that these were all taken from media headlines here in the United States. Turns out that every single one of these headlines occurred in the month of January. The very first month of this year. So what that tells me is there's a lot of emergencies, there are a lot of disasters taking place all around us. We may not be affected by it, but there are a lot of people who are being affected by them. And it doesn't necessarily mean that it won't be our turn tomorrow or the next day, but the reality is all of these are happening around us. And this happened just in 1 month of this year. So it kind of makes me wonder what the rest of this year is going to look like for us. Hopefully we got all the bad stuff out of the way at the front end.
So is Al Gore saying this is because of global warming?
I think it was yes. And it's a good thing we're able to use his internet to find out more about
Yes,
it.
yes, it's internet.
Right. Okay. And so U.S. disasters, as I've mentioned, disasters in the United States are something that we have to live with, being citizens and residents of the U.S. And so they're so prominent, these disasters, that different organizations have created what they call U.S. disaster maps to kind of outline the various types of disasters and emergencies that are likely to happen within certain regions. And so if you can tell from the brown area in the middle there, Kansas and Missouri fall in Region 7. And some of the disasters and emergencies that happen frequently in this area are severe storms, floods, winter storms, earthquakes, wildfires, tornadoes, pandemics, and economic downturns.
So would that be the most to the least? And I'd be surprised if tornadoes would be so low.
Right, I don't know that they are most to least. I just think it's just a grouping of the types of things that you experience in that region on a more frequent basis than the others. Some of them overlap. If you take a look, certain regions tend to have similar disasters that occur on a regular basis. But I think this map just does a good job of showing us that, depending on where you live, geography plays a large part in the types of emergencies and disasters that we should expect at some point in our lives and at least be prepared for one way or the other, right?
No one area is, every area has something.
Every area has issues, exactly.
So you decide
right.
whether you want to live in Hurricane Alley or Tornado Alley.
That's an excellent point. My wife and I talk about this. I always wanted to move to California, and she's afraid of earthquakes. And earthquakes haven't killed nearly as many people as tornadoes, so she'd rather stay in Kansas. I guess she can handle the tornadoes better than the earthquakes. So yeah, it just depends on where you want to live, right? All right, and so what I'd like to do now is just go through a few slides and talk to you about specific disasters that could occur, especially within our region. And the reason I'm doing this is not necessarily to scare you or make you nervous, but what we find is the more you know about these potential hazards, right? The more you know, the more you learn, the better you can prepare for them so that you can deal with them if and when they do arise. And so what I want to do is just share some statistics with you, just some informative stuff that we could talk about. We've talked a little bit about tornadoes already, and those probably are one of the most prevalent and destructive disasters that can occur in this area. But did you realize 1,200 tornadoes hit the U.S. every single year, and every single state is at risk of having a tornado? Now, some much higher than others, but every single state could have a tornado. Now, 75% of the tornadoes that occur in the world happen in the United States. So you're much more likely to experience a tornado in the U.S. than anywhere else in the world. Tornado damage paths can be in excess of 1 mile wide and 50 miles long. And I mentioned Joplin and Greensburg earlier. Those tornadoes, I believe the Greensburg tornado was measured at about 1 mile wide, and I think I might have that wrong. That's Joplin, and then Greensburg was 1.5 miles wide. That tornado was actually wider than the entire town, and it lasted for 22 miles, stretched for 22 miles. So it can do a lot of devastation and a lot of destruction. All right, so let's talk a little bit about flooding. We've seen and heard a lot about that lately, and certainly in the United States and in the Midwest, that's an issue. Floods can have caused over $6 billion a year in damage in the United States. So they do a lot of damage because they cover wide areas. And floods are the #1 cause of weather-related deaths in the United States. I didn't know that some time ago, but it's interesting to hear that. And then over the last 20 years, 100-year floods have been occurring with more and more frequency. Does anybody know really what a 100-year flood is? Have you heard that term before? Yeah. So a 100-year flood statistically is a flood, a significant flood that has a likelihood of 1% of occurring in any given year. And so what we're seeing is these things are happening more and more frequently. I don't think they can continue to call them 100-year floods because the statistics are starting to be more frequent than just 1% per year. So we may see that term
But I thought the
change.
100-year flood meant in one particular area.
Yes,
Like-
for one area,
For one
1%
area.
chance, right.
Right, yeah.
Right, that's exactly right, for a specific area, right. So you can be in a floodplain or something like that, you know, and it really has to do with the significance and the levels of the floods.
Like they were talking about the flood of '93 was probably 1 in 100 that was
Right.
around here.
Every once in a while, we get one that exceeds that, exactly right, yeah. Okay, the other thing I wanted to point out while we're still on floods is, I didn't realize this, but in the last 5 years, all 50 states have had major floods. And I guess I just don't really think of that. I know we have them around here, but anywhere you have water and anywhere you have low-lying areas, you are subject to floods.
And there just happens to be, I guess, certain areas that get more and more
prone.
news.
Exactly right. More news, exactly
Yeah.
right, yeah. Okay, so it's interesting, in the Midwest, we certainly aren't strangers to winter weather, which today is quite odd that it's as warm as it is and yesterday, but we still should think about it, educate ourselves on it, and prepare for it. So let me share a couple of statistics with you regarding blizzards. Did you realize a single snowstorm can drop 39 million tons of snow? That's a lot of snow.
Oh, man.
I've got a quiz.
2,000 pounds.
There you go. So I've got a quiz for you to see who's on the ball and thinking straight today. What's heavier, 39 million tons of snow or 39 million tons of bricks?
I say no.
No.
They're equal. There. Give this man a break. 39 million tons is still 39 million tons. You just have a lot more of it, right? So, sorry, I just had to do that just to test, make sure everybody's paying attention. All right, good answer. So, snowstorms are the #1 causes of blackouts, and I think we get that in this area. You know, the snow weighs heavily on the power lines or on trees near the power lines, and then they cause the power lines to go down, and that creates blackouts. And then here's an interesting one. Hypothermia can occur as the body reaches temperatures below 95 degrees Fahrenheit. And this kind of goes back to us talking about that matching slide, the rule of threes, and the whole 3 hours being out in inclement weather. If your body can't regulate itself, once it gets to 95 degrees, then your body starts shutting down and you start losing not only motor skills, but it does permanent damage to your body and can ultimately cause you to die. So that's just an interesting fact that I wasn't really aware of. I wanted to mention also, oh, that's on another slide, I'll get to that in just a second. So let's talk about epidemics and pandemics for just a second. Now, do we have anybody who's in the health field here? Because I honestly didn't know the difference between an epidemic and a pandemic. Does anyone know? What's that? Okay, so an epidemic is a disease that has occurred in either a larger population or a larger geographic area than normal. Okay, it's just outside the normal realm. Okay, but a pandemic is an epidemic of worldwide proportions. So it has expanded across the globe or a really large region. All right, we'll have some examples of that in just a second. So I just wanted to clarify that. It's something I had to do a little research on when I was learning more about this. So during the 1918 Spanish flu pandemic, which was about a century ago, granted, but up to 40%, can you imagine that? 40% of the world's population contracted this flu, and millions died as a result of it. Now back then, our medical and health-related care was not quite as good as it is today. We've got a lot of antibiotics and
But still, even back then,
combat
you
that.
think about it, air flight wasn't like it is, cars wasn't, the travel wasn't there, so
Right.
nowadays it's
I would
really.
think we'd be more susceptible to it these days, right?
Yeah.
That's an excellent point. So a little bit more recently, does everyone remember the bird flu scare? And you still
Yeah.
hear it every once in a while, I think, but that flu caused over 230,000 deaths worldwide. That's about 250,000 people. That's a lot of people, you know, in modern day with better health care and health-related services. Now here's one that I find extremely interesting. The bubonic plague, I think everyone's heard of it, the Black Death. It's known as the deadliest plague ever known to mankind. Now there's a stat up there, but I want to share something to put it into perspective. The bubonic plague has been plaguing this earth for over 2,000 years. That plague dates back that far. And the problem is we still haven't wiped it off the face of the earth. You'd think we had figured out a way to do that by now. But as recently, this slide says last year, now we're into January, so it was actually 2014. we had 11 cases of the bubonic plague in the United States. And every once in a while, we actually have a death as well. So we haven't gotten rid of it. Reality is, there's no known prevention for it, but you can treat it with the proper antibiotics if you find it in time and you diagnose it in time, because sometimes it's, people don't realize what it is. The doctors don't know that that's what they're looking at. So you've got a 90% chance of survival if you contract it, as long as you get the right antibiotics in your system. Okay. So let's talk about blackouts for just a minute. This one I think is really interesting, just because of the fact that I think most of us is probably, has everybody experienced a blackout in their life? I mean, your power goes out. To this day, I think the wind blows and the power goes out in my house. I don't know how that works, but I've got a pretty new house, so it's not old electricity. So let's share a couple of stats on this. One thing that people don't really realize about our electrical grid is that it was built at the turn of last century. So that late 1800s and the early 1900s was when our electrical system, the foundation for how we get electricity, was built in the United States. Now there have been upgrades and things along the way, but the reality is most of the parts are still stuff that they built way back when. So it doesn't surprise me, to see this statistic that aging infrastructure and growing population, extreme weather are causing more and more blackouts. In 2003, and here's a very poignant example of a blackout. In 2003, the Northeast blackout resulted in 50 million Americans being left without power. Does anyone know where that started? Canada. It actually started, it made its way into Canada, yes. It started in Ohio as a result of some power lines and some trees getting crossed, right? And there was this cascading effect, this power outage, that one grid blew out another grid, blew out another grid, and they couldn't stop it. It worked all the way from the Midwest to the Northeast and into Canada, so that by the end of it, over 50 million people were without power. Now, back in, 2003, the early part of the 2000s, there were about 300 million people living in the United States at that time. So we're talking about 1/6 of the population, 1 in 6 people have actually had no power at a given point in time as a result of our poor electrical grid. So I just thought that was kind of interesting with some of the research that I've done. Now, in 2004, just a year later, Congress warned that an EMP attack, and we'll talk about EMP in just a second, could cause a massive blackout that would shut down electric power transmission potentially for months. So, if Congress finally got around to it and figured it out, that it's a problem, because they're usually the last to figure these things out. Sorry for the political commentary.
It's a whole other meeting.
It's a whole other meeting, yes it is. We can stick around afterwards if you want to talk. All right. And so EMP, does anyone know what EMP stands for? Right here. There you go. Bracelet for you, sir. And there you go. And so EMP stands for electromagnetic pulse. Now I don't profess to be a physics major or anything, so I don't know exactly how they work. The reality is it's a very serious surge of energy, right? And so I do know that EMPs can occur in nature through things like lightning strikes, and they can also occur in solar flares, exactly right. They can also occur in man-made weapons. And really that's what Congress was talking about in 2004, is that they see that certain terrorists have started attacking power grids in other countries, and their concern was for the United States that that sort of an attack on us could cause really major power outages across the United States and for an extended period of time, right? And so that's just a concern that they raised that we need to be aware of. All right. Now, I said earlier I wasn't trying to make you nervous or preach gloom and doom, because that's not really what we're here for. We've talked about a lot of different emergencies and disasters that could occur in our lives. Really, again, more for education, because we need to know what they are and what they're about in order to figure out how to prepare for them. And so when you talk about prepping and preppers, it's even in the title of our name, most people think about doomsday preppers, doom and gloom. And that's really not what we're here to preach and talk about. What we're here to preach and talk about is education, is about being proactive and taking positive measures to protect yourselves, protect your families in the event of many of these likely occurrences happening in this area or wherever you may be. right? We saw the disaster map. It doesn't really matter where you are. There's something that could happen. So it's just about educating yourselves and taking proper precautions to protect yourselves, to protect your families. Does that make sense? So our goal, as I kind of mentioned earlier and stated on the screen here, is to offer family-friendly prepping environment that makes it easy, that makes it accessible, and that makes it affordable for people to get started. All right, there's two major concerns that all of us deal with when it comes to preparing for disasters and emergencies. And one is trying to figure out, where to start, because where do you start? There's so many things that can happen. And the other one is to be able to do it in a cost-effective manner, because you could spend a lot of money buying a lot of supplies, and if you're not buying the right types of supplies, etc., then you're just wasting your time and your money. So just thinking through those two items, and that's our goal, to help people think those things through and how they might affect them in their lives. So has anyone seen this phrase before? Failing to prepare, you are preparing to fail. Does anyone know who might have said that?
Is that NPR?
No? No? Newt Rockney, no? No?
Benjamin Franklin?
Benjamin Franklin, who said that in the back? Very nice. Let's go ahead and,
I took a stab.
can you catch it if I throw it?
Yeah.
There you go. Good answer. Benjamin Franklin, pretty smart guy, right? Let's see, I think I have his name on the slide. And so, from our standpoint, preparing and planning is an extremely serious matter. And so for those of you who know Shawn and I have each spent about 20 years in the financial services industry working with families, working with individuals, and helping them prepare for a successful financial future. And what we've done with Game Plan Preppers is really just taking that planning to a more fundamental level, right? Not just the financial planning. We still do feel that it's important for you to get your financial matters in order, but we feel it's critically important that you spend time thinking about preparing for emergencies and disasters to be able to put yourself in a position to protect your families, protect yourselves, and to help each other in the event that something like that should happen. And so that's why we've come together to develop Game Plan Preppers. All right, now when it comes to kind of next steps, what we recommend for everyone as a starting point, I talked about where do we start and how do we do it in a cost-effective manner. Here's what we recommend as a starting point, and that's make a plan, all right? So, as Benjamin Franklin said it, if you don't make the plan, then basically what you're doing is preparing to fail. And so what we recommend is that every individual, every family at least, has a game plan in place so that it takes into consideration all different types of disasters, and we've identified at least 20 or more through our own planning that people should and could prepare for. But in addition to taking into consideration all the different things that could happen, we also think it's important for you to have a personalized plan that takes into consideration 4 key factors. And one of those is your family size. One of those is your geography. We kind of saw from some of the conversations we've had. One of those is the, what else have we got? We've got family size, we've got geography, we've got personal concerns, right? And we've got length of time that you want to prepare for. We talked about personal concerns. Some people are more concerned about earthquakes, tornadoes, whatever, but length of time as well. We recommend as a starting point that you start by preparing for just 3 days. The power could go out for 3 days, you could be stuck in a snowstorm, anything could happen to, you could have to leave your house for a few days, who knows, but at least be prepared for 3 days. Many people take it more serious and start planning for longer periods of time, and that's fine, but at least at a minimum being prepared for those 3 days. And so those are some of the things that we offer for our own personal game plans, and we do create individual personalized game plans for families. We've got some up here if you want to take a look at. But we're not here necessarily today to sell you a game plan. We're not here to talk to you. We've got lots of products and things, but what we're here to do is just bring your attention to these items. You can get them anywhere. You can go on the internet. You can do the research if you have the time and energy to do it yourself. But again, all we're trying to do is make it simple, accessible, and affordable for you. And we do personalized game plans. Just to give you a little bit more detail around what we do, is our personalized game plans help people figure out what steps to take before, during, and after an emergency, right? So that pre, mid, and post game plan, so you know what to do and how to react. In addition to that, these particular plans will include crime prevention plans, fire safety plans, evacuation plans, shelter-in-place plans, a lot of different types of plans. And then at the end, what it does is it will specifically tell you what you need in order to prepare for whatever it is you're preparing for. All right, so it will specifically say, based on the size of your family and the amount of time you are preparing for, you need so much food, so many calories per day for each individual, and you need so much water that we discussed earlier, critical elements that we need to survive. And so those are some of the things that these individual game plans will provide to you, and that's what we do from a planning standpoint in taking our financial planning expertise and knowledge and applying it to emergency and disaster preparedness. All right, so I've got a couple more things to say, and then Shawn's going to get up here and do a demo, but let me just stop right there. We do, as I said, have some of these plans up here up front. If you want to take a look at them, just kind of thumb through them and see what's in there. Do you have any questions about what I just explained as far as the game plans and having a plan? Does anyone have an actual plan in place, let's say for tornadoes or a fire, something that might be common in this area? Does anyone have a written plan in place? No?
I don't know if it's written, I know
Not
it's verbal with
written.
grandson.
Okay, so
Yeah.
verbal and maybe mental, you've thought it
We know where we're
through?
going to
Right.
be, you know, if we're separated.
So that's the very foundation, right? So
Right.
you at least know if this happens, we're going to do that. And so all we've done and all that we recommend you do is really think it through in depth. There are a lot of different things other than a fire or tornado that could occur. So how are you going to be prepared for that, and how will you react if and when that happens? And that's really all we're trying to do with our game plans. Does that make sense? Okay. All right. So let me talk to you a little bit about CERT and emergency responders. Having a plan, as I've mentioned, can be critical in an emergency situation. It could be a matter of life and death, right? Whether it's one of these plans or just having a plan, okay? So you know how you're going to get out of your house in the event of a fire, that's a plan, right? Emergency responders take this to a whole new level, don't they? Because they've got plans for everything, and they practice and they drill and they continue to work on those plans so that they are rote and they've got them in their memory, so they know exactly what to do anytime these things occur. And so one of the things that we've done, and one of the things that they've done, is they've created different types of opportunities for the public to learn more about how they respond in different types of emergencies. And Shawn and Ben and I were fortunate enough not too long ago to be able to participate in one of those programs, and it's called the CERT program. And the CERT program is something that's sponsored by FEMA, the Federal Emergency Management Administration, but it's conducted at the local level, and we took ours through the Olathe Fire Department, which I think we all agree was a fantastic program, and we highly recommend for anybody who's interested. But these programs take place all over the country all year long. In fact, over 2,600 CERT programs in the U.S.
So it's open to the public.
It's open to the public, exactly right, yes. And so that's exactly what they're looking for. In fact, the reason they exist is to help prepare members of the community to help others, right, in the event that there's a widespread emergency or disaster. Why do you think they do that? Because they can't do everything, right? And that's one of the things they told us day one in that program, was that they need the community to rally behind them, because the reality is there are so few of them and so many of us that they know from experience time and time again, if there's a disaster or a wide-scale emergency, they're not going to be able to help everyone immediately. It's going to take time. So what does that mean to you and I as citizens?
We better be prepared.
We need to be prepared. It also means that we need to be able to fend for ourselves until they can bring help, right? Until they do arrive.
Because they're going to help the most, the ones that are hurt the most.
The most critical, yeah. I think Shawn tells me, yeah, if you're walking and talking, you're the last person they're going to come help, right? You may still need help or want help, but you'll be the last person on their list because they have more critical urgency or urgent needs. Does that make sense? And so that's one of the things that I really wanted to drive that point home, and it was really kind of a shock factor to me, because I always think, well, I pay tax dollars, and you know, there's emergency services. If something happens, I'm going to be taken care of. And what they told us in day one was, no, there's not enough of us to take care of all of you. So you need to figure out how to take care of yourself, how to take care of your families, and how to take care of your own community in the event this happens, so that you'll be prepared and able to do so until we can come and provide additional
So I
services.
guess you can go online.
Absolutely
Google
can.
that, and they can
Yes.
tell you when to come and have the next class or.
Absolutely. And most, I'd start with local government and or the fire department or police department.
And if you type in CERT online and just whatever city you live in, you'll be able to kind of track down the program. Olathe is getting ready to start another program.
Right.
So I think in the next couple of weeks they're taking sign-ins.
Do most cities in Johnson County merge together and say like,
No, Overland Park has its own CERT
Has its
program.
own.
Shawnee
Olathe
does.
has one, Shawnee has one. So, and you're either taught by police or fire.
So people who are doing it on a daily basis.
And they work with you to let you know kind of what you need in certain circumstances too, or?
They do, yes. There's an element of here's how we can train you to help others, and an element of here's what you need to do to be prepared. Right? So there's a little bit of both of those.
Like in our, we got first aid certified, right? So they do all that stuff. That list of things that is on the slide, those are things that they teach you and you learn through the process.
Right.
So they can actually help you become CPR certified and.
And our particular program wasn't CPR certified, it was first aid, but yes,
But still
some of those
that's-
programs will, yes. Okay. All right, so.
Actually, well, we got CPR parts too.
No,
We're doing that.
First aid, did we really?
Yeah.
Oh, okay, well, I'm probably not the guy you want to do CPR,
Okay.
because I didn't even know I was certified.
I'll do that.
I must have missed that part. I thought it was just first aid, I'm not doing these.
See what happens when you don't have coffee?
There you
if
go.
your city might not have that certificate, kids should go to Olathe?
Oh, absolutely, because I'm out in Shawnee, and
See, I live in
you're in
Michigan, I don't know
Olathe.
if they have it here or not.
I don't know if they do here locally, I know they do in Shawnee, Overland Park, and Olathe. Yes, I went to the one in Olathe, and I live in Shawnee, so you absolutely can. They just need community volunteers, and they accept them, because they know that there will be someone to help when they can. Okay. All right, so what we do in addition to the plans is we help people identify the emergencies, disasters, the hazards that they are concerned about. And so in addition to the plan is the preparedness part. So you can have a plan and that tells you what you need to do. The preparedness is actually doing some of it, right? And so that's making sure you have the appropriate resources and supplies in the event that an emergency does occur. And so one of the things that we've done in order to make it simple, accessible, and affordable is we've created different kits, emergency kits and packages and things that you can utilize in preparing for yourselves and your families. And one of those kits is our 72-hour pre-built emergency kit. And at this point, I think we're going to have Shawn come up here and do a little demo and walk you through what's in that kit. But as he's coming up here and getting ready to do that, I've got a question for you. If you think through it, and let me just throw an easy one at you, 72 hours, you've got to go without all the modern conveniences because maybe there was a flood or a fire or something where now you've got to leave your house, but you don't have access to modern conveniences. What are some of the things that you would put in your emergency kit? Any thoughts? Toilet paper, number one. What
There you
else?
go.
Toothpaste, right? What else?
Water.
Soap, bread. Did somebody say bread? Oh, what'd you say?
I said soap.
Soap, okay, there you go. All right. Matches for fires, right? What else would you put in it?
Magnesium block.
What's that?
Magnesium block.
Magnesium block, very good, yes. That will help you start a fire, right. All right, so anyway, I just wanted to get you started thinking about that, and what's going to happen now is Shawn's going to walk you through some of the things that we put in our kits. Keep in mind, everybody has a different opinion in what should be in their personal kit. It depends on where you're at, what you're preparing for, personal concerns, etc. But what we've tried to do is just put something together that applies to everyone that will be effective in most every emergency. And so Shawn's going to kind of walk you through that and talk you through some of the supplies that we put in our kits.
And at this point, if you do want to come closer so you can see things, we're going to basically hand things around so that you can
I can pass them around
see
too.
what we're doing, yeah. And Sarah, if you want to come up too. So one of the areas that we start with is the ability to create heat and keep yourself warm and also provide light. So the section that covers that is on the side of the bag. And there's a lot of interesting little tools that are out there. One of the things that we focused on when we started looking at different things that we would want to keep, you know, flashlights are a really great example. Flashlight's something that pretty much probably everyone has a flashlight, at least one. They keep one in the glove box of their car, maybe in the trunk, or it's down in the basement in the drawer. Has anybody ever reached for a flashlight and tried to turn it on and then it didn't turn on?
Oh,
No.
Never happened.
No, it never happened. Mostly because of the battery, right? So what we did is we did a lot of research into what items can we buy that are going to work when we need them to work, right? And so the flashlight that we selected is one that is a hand crank, so you never have to worry about whether the batteries are going to work, because it's always going to work. It also
Something
has,
to do in the dark.
huh?
It gives you something to do in the dark.
Yeah, so, and then you've got several different settings, and it works, so you'll have light. And that's one of the things we looked at. We also wanted to be able to drop it, throw it in the water, and let it sink to the bottom, pick it up, and you can use it. This is also waterproof, so.
I assume it's lightweight, and is it made of aluminum, or
It's mostly plastic.
it's plastic?
Solar charging, hand crank, waterproof.
How long do they also make a generator thing on it?
Oh,
Not
yeah.
how long does it last?
Yeah, I don't know. It's about, for every 60 seconds, you get about an hour to 2 hours with a light.
Okay, because I've had some past.
Yeah. So 60 seconds, 2 minutes. In fact, we tested it by cranking it for, I don't know, 5 minutes or so, and then just dropping it in a bucket of water, and then we just kept checking on it. The next day, it was still working, so overnight, still going.
And you had a great question or a great point, is that, you know, a lot of these things that we're looking at, there's hundreds or even thousands of different options to choose from, right? So some of the things we look at are, well, what's the cost, what's the durability, but also whether it's lightweight. And so plastic is something that's lightweight. It's also durable and it's waterproof. And so you got to think about all those different things. You don't want everything, if you've got everything in here that's metal, it's going to be heavy, it's going to dent, it's going to rust, it's going to fall apart. So a lot of the things are very lightweight material, plastic, aluminum things, rubber, things like that, that won't be destroyed.
I hope it's a pretty good grade plastic, because of course during time, you may have that for a decade,
Yeah, take a look
and
at it.
it's going to crack, and
Yeah.
one thing or if it's plastic.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, you got it. It's still pretty durable.
Yeah. So then the other thing that we selected out of the item was just a simple radio that has a couple functions. It's a radio, it's also a lantern, and it also is hand crank and solar. So those are some other options that we wanted to be able to offer in that.
What kind of radio?
Just a regular radio.
Yeah, it's AM, FM, right?
AM, FM. So, and then we had a few other, somebody said magnesium. So, you know, we have a fire, kind of a group of things that start fire. And in it, my favorite thing is the actual lighter. So, just a regular lighter.
Run out of fluid.
Exactly. But there's also a fire starter, a striker in here. There's also waterproof matches, and so just a small package of items that you can use to create fire. And then light. So that's the lantern. So and then the light. We actually put in 3 of these 30-hour candles. So each one will burn for 30 hours. And then we also have these light sticks. And so one of the things that these come in handy for would be to help locate you. So if you have them near you, if you're getting ready to have a disaster, you know it's coming, you're going to go hopefully down to if it's a tornado coming, you're going to go down to your basement. Hopefully you're storing your stuff down in the basement and have access to these things. So if your house comes down on top of you, having these types of things around you might help you to be found. So there's also a whistle. There's also a whistle in that bag too, so that's for that purpose as well.
Do you think we should start with one person?
I think this is, you have that to start out with.
Passes around.
Now, you
These
have
are also air activated body warmers. They'll last for 16 hours for each one. So we put 4 of those in our kit.
Take a look at it.
Now, this is a 72-hour, you say?
72-hour survival bag, yes.
How many different type of, you have 4 or 5 different kits going here, or how many?
This is just one kit.
This is
I
one
was
kit.
going to say, you don't want to have 5 or 6 of these things around the house for a 24-hour, 30,
No.
you can't have all those.
No.
Okay.
And then we also have, these are food bricks. So we look at calorie count, and each one of these bricks is 2,400 calories.
Oh, you're gonna test that.
Horrible.
You're gonna pass it around?
Yeah, actually, that's what this.
I don't want any part of that. I mean, I had it in the service enough.
They're better now.
Now, we will tell you they've gotten better. We've actually made meals out of it.
I don't care. I'll start.
I will tell you, they actually taste like pie crust. So they're actually very good. I'm sorry you had a bad experience with yours, but we've selected, there's a lot of different options to select from. And so we've tested several of them. And these are actually, Shawn, you might want to tell them a little bit about the SOS.
Yeah, I was going to go through and tell them.
Would you like to try one?
Here, I'll take one.
They really aren't bad. They taste like pie crust.
So, can everybody hear me okay? Okay. So, those are manufactured by a company called SOS Food Labs. And what they do, they're not MREs or canned spam that the old military used to serve. These are actually things that give you the calories and the nutrients that you need to survive. And what I usually say when we're talking to people about them is, you're going to try it and you're going to go, wow, that's actually pretty good. So the idea behind it is it doesn't create dryness in your mouth so that you need more water. So they actually call it non-thirst provoking. It has a 5-year shelf life. You can store it in extreme cold, extreme heat, doesn't matter. Stored in Mylar bags so it keeps bacteria out for that whole period of time. And I've looked at them and I would look at it and go, I would eat these long after expiration as long as that Mylar bag is sealed closed and tight. So did you pass the bricks around? Okay. And so those come in those bricks. So what did everybody think of those?
It tastes like those sugar cookies you brought.
Yeah. So the idea behind them is that they need to be edible so that you'll eat them. But when they're so compact, you see the small bricks, they're compact. They don't weigh a whole lot. But just one of those bricks is almost a day and a half worth of calories for a person. So you add 2 bricks into the bag and you now have basically 72 hours worth of food.
So something I didn't mention a little earlier when we were talking about food is the average adult male who's moderately active needs about 2,500 calories per day to maintain their body weight. And the average female who's moderately active needs about 2,000 calories per day. So this is just making sure you can replenish and have the calories and the intake that you need to sustain yourself until you get through the emergency.
And so the company that makes those particular bricks, there's 8 or 9 different companies out there that make them. We've tried all of them. We actually had a dinner one night where all of the partners tried all of the different brands, and SOS was the one that by far liked the most. SOS also makes those smaller Millennium bars that are 400 calories per bar. Same shelf life, same storage, everything's the same about them except for they've added flavoring like apricot and some other flavors in there. So that's the second set of foods. So now you've got 2,400 times 2 plus 6 bars of 400 calories. So you have a lot of calories to take care of yourself during a time of need when you eat them. The other things that we talked about are water. So has anybody so when you travel down south of the country, what do they say you're not supposed to do? Don't drink the water, right? Why is that? Why should you not drink the water?
You don't want dysentery.
Right. So,
Dehydration.
exactly. So what you want to run into is, this is a filtration bottle that you fill with water, and when you fill it, you put river water, whatever kind of water in it. You flip the top, and it filters through the system, and as you're drinking it, it gives you non-bacteria filled, whatever else, all the other things, non-lethal water. So it keeps you from getting sick from the water you're drinking. And then we also add these water purification tablets, and this is one where currently the U.S. Army uses this particular brand, and so they want to make potable water that's drinkable. You can use it. That's what this is for. So through the process of water, when we talk about it, we also have actual bags of water. And again, water's heavy, right? So you can't necessarily carry some gallons of water with you if you're going somewhere or you need to. So what we added were pouches of water that you can drink out of when you can't access or can't find any other water. And so when you find water, you're using this to get to a place where you can find water, hopefully, and you can use those types of things.
Well, I can see an issue when you're gonna have to become pretty familiar with what's in there. You're not gonna wait till the disaster and say, well, I better read the instructions.
Right.
Yeah. What I need to do on this. There's gonna be a lot of studying prior.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Most of it's pretty
Instead
basic.
of putting it away and saying, I don't want anything to do with it until the disaster's out there. You're about as bad as not having it. I think that's that point.
I'd still like to have it in my possession, right?
So this particular item is a 5-quart water compactable. So it helps you find water. You find water, you can put it in here. If you had to carry it with you, you can always have some with you. You can put that into the water bottle, put the chlorine in it if you need to. We actually have lots of different articles. We just posted a blog article on how to disinfect and how to filtrate water. And so on our website, we'll introduce you to it in a few minutes. You'll be able to access lots of content and information that helps you figure out exactly what you were talking about is how do I use all of this stuff once I get it, what's it for. The next item that we get into is so who has, somebody mentioned hygiene.
Soap, toothpaste.
Yeah. So this bag has a few items in it, including pocket tissue, which is also toilet paper. We've got Q-tips, some mouthwash, Germex, hand sanitizer, shampoo, soap, toothbrush, toothpaste, dental floss, all in a nice compact little case. Pass that around.
I see a possibility in that when you fly. That looks like everything is,
Yeah.
Yeah.
looks like you could take that.
All right.
How much does the pack weigh?
22 pounds, 22.7 pounds. The goal was to keep it as light as possible, but give you all the tools that you need. Now, some bags are bigger. Our main pre-built bag is just this bag, but we also have another bag that will show you that you can put a lot more in. So a man can carry a certain amount of weight, women can carry a certain amount of weight, but a lot of it's really just based on your weight and the amount of weight that you should be able to carry for a long period of time if you were to carry a bag somewhere. Now, hopefully, the idea is if you have a bag, you know how to use the contents, but you're going to store that somewhere. You're not going to hopefully have to carry it or lug it around for miles and miles and miles. But there's lots of examples where that can happen, cases where that can happen.
I actually keep mine in my car, and I've got one for my wife, so we keep those in our car. We've got other storage stuff down in our basement in case there's a tornado or something, emergency kits and water and things like that. But we keep one in our car because our cars are usually with us. We're usually with our cars. And even when we're home, if there's an emergency, we can get them out of the car and take them where we need them. So we've always, no matter where we're at, we've got something that we can utilize.
The other thing that we talked about a little bit is first aid. So each pack has a small first aid kit, 107 items, and there are items that you would need to take care of yourself if you were to get hurt. And you get infected, those kind of things. There's antiseptics, there's all kinds of different things in there. There's also N95 masks. These filter out particles from the air. So one of the things that killed a lot of first responders after 9/11 was all the stuff that they were breathing, and they got sick from that. So a lot of them have cancer now because they didn't wear masks like that. That's the kind of mask that helps keep that stuff away from your lungs. If you had to, there's a small stove in here.